Hi, poets. Liz Whiteacre here to talk with you about micro-level revision techniques, ways you can edit lines as you are working with drafts that are very new or you are polishing drafts for a manuscript. So for this video, you will need a growth mindset. We need to be flexible with our thinking as we look at our poems and a poem that needs revising. So please pause the video and grab a poem that you'd like to work with during these exercises. Great, let's get started. So for revision techniques that we're going to experience today, I'm calling the breath test, the prune test, the heartbeat test, and the cliff test. And these are essentially revision prompts, strategies you can use on any poem at any point in the process. And this is just a little sampling, ones that serve me well as a poet in my own practice, and also ones that are very easy to do kind of quickly. They can also be really helpful when you're looking at other people's poems, when you're a reader in workshop or a friend has shared something with you. So the first one is a breath test. And this is actually a revision exercise that is wonderful to do with someone else. Asking someone to read your poem out loud can help you hear how your poem is being interpreted by other people. And reading your poem out loud and having someone listen and take notes on where are you pausing, right? How quickly are you moving? They can make like a little hash mark where they hear a line break, regardless of what it might look like on the page. So that can also be helpful. But if you're on your own and you are working with your poem, perhaps while you are watching this video, you can certainly do this on your own as well. The breath test is about reading out loud and noting where you pause, like you're naturally pausing to take a breath, or maybe processing what you just read. Also, where you might naturally stumble, maybe you trip over words, or maybe you are like, whoa, as you move through a line break or a stanza break, or maybe you run out of air. Perhaps you've written a prose poem with no punctuation and you can't make it all the way to the end of the poem. Is that what you want out of your reader experience? You can also listen for unintention, and again, unintention tongue twisters or kind of clunky consonant clusters. Ah, see what I did right there? Clunky consonant clusters that could distract from your intention. Uh, we're so focused on trying to get through saying the thing that we're not really processing what it is it's trying to elicit from us as readers and listeners. There could be moments where words feel very monotonous. You kind of start tuning out. There's not anything there that's catching your attention or helping you build a picture or helping you connect with emotions or feel emotions. Or sometimes things that are repetitive. Maybe you've used the same word a couple of times in the poem because that's what came to mind first when you were drafting very quickly, maybe in response to a prompt, but you're not using the technique of anaphora or repetition, right? It's not something that you have built into the poem to make it feel like it's supposed to be that way. And again, we're just noticing when we do this. So this is an example of a 5-minute free write that I did in class, kind of leaping off work in the realm of nature writing, and I wrote it very quickly. So this is a poem that I'm going to go through and do this when you pause, and we will return to talk about what happened. But I'd like you to read your poem out loud and make notes. Are there places where you're pausing, but not at a line break? Maybe you're reading it more quickly than what the lines are, or you're reading it more slowly than what the lines might suggest. Are there those moments where you stumble, you run out of air? And then pause for a moment and think about your intention. Right? How do you want to guide readers through this moment? Is it very meditative, reflective? Do you want to intentionally slow it down with shorter line breaks? Is your speaker agitated or anxious or upset or feeling really passionate about something? Do you want to kind of ramp up that tension? And if there's something you see that you would like to revise at this point, please revise. Thank you for spending that time with your poem. You're going to really get to know it well by the end of this video. Another test you can do is the prune test. And we're not talking about those delicious dried fruits. We're talking about pruning a plant. Here is a picture of a bonsai. This is kind of a very well-known art where uh, people prune away branches in order to get specific shapes. So I really, really appreciate this as a metaphor. When I think about going in to look at my work, I often start with a really big, huge free write. Um, when it's a 5 minute in class write, it's something much smaller, as I'm sure you've experienced too. But I'll just start and just fill up a whole page, and then I think, how do I need to frame this as a poem, and what do I pull out, and what do I keep? So a prune test, sometimes it can be helpful to think about how you are describing. So this is a revision problem I personally do at the beginning of the process to think about how I am leaping in a poem. What are those natural descriptors that kind of came out at the very beginning, and how are they working? Do I have opportunities for other things, other types of leaps? And so the first thing I choose to do is look at how adjectives and adverbs are being used, because those are the words that I kind of pull from most quickly when I'm generating something. As we go through the test and we make our notes and we look at what's there on the poem, we also want to think about, well, are all of these words necessary? Are there places we could condense? Maybe we're using 3 adjectives to describe something where one might be more efficient and more impactful. There could also be opportunities to use different types of figurative language to increase that kind of image density so people can really see what's happening in the poem. Even if they might not be connecting all the dots, like there are things there that they are latching onto and trying to figure out opportunities for connection. So here is my draft after I did the breath test. And so you'll notice it has changed a little bit. I won't read it again, but I'm going to, on my poem, take a look at the adjectives, adverbs, and then think about what choices I might like to make. Whew, I did that so quick, right? I wasn't going to make you struggle through watching me do them all live time. But I did that when I was creating the slides. And you'll notice that there is kind of towards the bottom half of the poem, a lot more descriptive words than at the top. And I noticed that was because I used more verbs up at the top to describe what the radishes were like. Um, and I used more adjectives and adverbs to kind of describe what am I doing with those radishes when I take them into the kitchen, and how I'm feeling about those. So that is what I noticed. If you could please pause the video, read your poem's draft. If you want to continue reading out loud, you can. If you prefer to be quiet, that works too. And like I highlighted my adjectives and adverbs, you do that too. I have a little tip on the screen if you're like, what were those again? So a noun plus the descriptor is usually the adjective. And you can think about if that's exactly what you want, or there could be a noun that could be a little bit more specific than the noun plus adjective. You can also think about a verb and an adverb. And those are like ending with ly, ing, and think about, well, could a more specific verb be useful there? And then also think about opportunities for leaps. So, for example, I might say the wind blew very loudly. So you all picturing that, right? That works. I could instead perhaps say the wind howled. And in howling, right, that verb, suddenly I've personified wind and given wind some personality there. Uh, the wind is also through howling, maybe feeling more aggressive, a little bit scarier, uh, versus the wind whispered, right? That might feel like a very gentle, comforting thing. Another example was the lake was sparkly and shimmery, right? And I looked at that and I was like, well, what's sparkly and shimmery? And I was thinking about sequins. I had just seen a commercial for figure skating. All the sequins popped to mind. So here I'm still having an adjective, but the sequined lake kind of gave me a interesting image of what that lake might look like in a different way than saying it was sparkly and shimmery. And I've also kind of condensed my language there. The sequined lake has more stressed syllables, and so it packs a little bit more of a punch versus the lake was sparkly and shimmery, right? There's more of a rise and a fall. So it goes down to what effects you want to have. Sometimes there could be a more efficient way of saying something, but the slower way of saying something might fit better with the mood. So as you're going through, note them and then think about the choices. Do you have vivid imagery? Are you able to put in relatable examples? Are there opportunities to use other types of figurative language? Is something just pleasurable? It's really nice to say out loud for readers. And then take a moment to revise. Two more tests. And again, these are things you can just do once. You can do all in a row. You can do sometimes. And get in touch with me if you want more. There are lots of different things you can do with your poems to proof them, to test them, to see are they working as I want them to work. So if you're doing these strategies at the end of a project before you're ready to share with editors at a literary magazine or before you're putting these into a book manuscript, you might say, oh, well, there's not really anything to do here. And that can be a really great feeling. Or you can go in and mess things about, change the tense, change the speaker, write it upside down. Those things can help you know, like, oh, it's terrible. How I have it is the best poem it can be right now. Other times you're like, yeah, that is really, oh, I really like that. And it might let you know that your poem isn't quite its best self yet or quite what you want it to be. So the heartbeat test. Um, the heartbeat test is thinking about your syllable count. And I use the title The Heartbeat Test because I could find a snazzy image of a heartbeat monitor, but also because when I was in school learning about fixed forms or those recipes and the sonnet, one thing that has always stuck with me was iambic pentameter when we were studying Shakespearean and other sonnets, where that stressed, unstressed creates the sound of the heartbeat in the line. And that's something that I don't know. I think it's very lovely and it makes me aware of my lines in terms of how they're working in a rhythmic way. And it serves me well. So what you would do first is tap out the syllables of your line. And I recommend using a helper with your hand. Tap out the syllables of your lines on a tablet and note how many each line. I think that was just over 20. Again, you don't need to see me struggle. And mark how many there. Again, we're not looking for perfect math. Sometimes that can be the intention and it can feel really great. If you're working with a fixed form like a sonnet or something that has a specific rhythm and meter, well, then that is very important and very intentional. And this test can help you see whether or not you followed along. But it makes you pause and kind of think about the syllables. I say things out loud, so I can also think about stressed, right? Stressed, the hard syllable and the soft syllable, because that can also affect the tone and the voice of your poem. Are you writing a lullaby and you want more unstressed syllables to soothe people who read it before they go to sleep? Or are you really, I don't know, getting your New Year's on and you want to blast what is important and use very stressed syllables to, pop as readers read? So you can take a moment to see what's there and then think about your intention. And it's an opportunity to maybe trim like filler words. Maybe you've got and. Um, and the pile up isn't as important. A comma could do to separate those things. You could also sometimes reword something like I did with the sequence dress versus the dress, or the sequence lake versus the lake was shimmery and shiny, right? By flipping the modifier before the noun, I don't have the ands in there anymore. So here is an example of what it looks like noted. So this is before I made any changes on my last draft, but after the last activity. And you'll notice I have 14, 15, 16 are on the high end, and then I've got 8 and 9 on the low end and some in between. So if you could please pause this and read through your poem's draft and note the lines. Again, we are looking at each syllable. And if you also want to consider what's stressed and unstressed, you could do that too. Think about how the rhythm and pace is aligning with the mood, the tone, the swiftness. Are you writing a rant poem where things should be very, very quick? Right? Pack a lot of punch, leave us breathless. Or are you reflecting on a, a childhood memory that brings you joy with your grandmother? And it's a moment of quiet, private love that you're reflecting on and inside the mind, and it can be very soothing, right? You're going to make different choices in those different situations. So check it out, make your notes, and then revise as you would at this moment in time. And then we've got the cliff test. I'm calling this the cliff test because whoosh, cliffs can be pretty sheer, and they can also be a little bit sloping. But the cliff test is focusing on the end words and thinking about how are we leaving readers as we end a line and they pick up and they move to the next line. We have a great opportunity there. Readers read quickly. People reading out loud read a little bit more slowly. But when we look here, cover the poem and look at only the words at the ends of your lines. So I'm giving you that moment of holding the in your head and lines in your head. So this exercise is thinking about those moments, those opportunities, and deciding, are they working as we hope they were? Would we maybe want to maximize tension in any moments? What's resonating? What's keeping in people's minds? And there are lots of different reasons to break lines that we've talked about. but this test asks us to focus just on those moments. So here you notice after our, well, while you were working, I was working, and I tightened up my lines. I found that 10, sometimes 11 accounts, so I didn't have to break a word in the middle, uh, was a really nice, gentle pace for the winter garden draft that I'm working on. And here I've just highlighted, I couldn't figure out a way to just slide a sheet of paper over. You can do that. I highlighted the last words. And with cleaning up the poem, looking at the first draft and looking at this draft, it was really pleasurable to see that all of my end words leave you with something, right? Above, kind of looking disheveled, night, gentle, rush, rosy, seeds, labor, bitter, summer, winter, abundance. So I was pretty pleased with that. And you'll see what I chose to do in a moment. I'd like you to take time to pause and study your end words. What impact does each have? What's the difference between, right? Ending on rosy, right? Cheeks are rosy versus cheeks are rosy, this gift is, right? What's in your head when you have is and you're holding that over to the next moment. So be thinking about that and then revise if you see an opportunity. And if you're like this reason, this reason, this reason, it's doing exactly what I want, leave it be. So I hope, and I'll show you mine in just a moment, that going through these exercises have given you an opportunity to work with a poem in an interesting way. You certainly have gotten to know it a lot better than maybe when you first opened up your file or opened up your notebook. But again, these are examples of revision prompts. Just like we have writing prompts that get us to generate material, we can go to revision prompts to help us work with our poems and make sure that they are communicating with readers what we hope to communicate. You definitely want to pair this with feedback from readers. So Winter Garden is a poem that I'll probably now take and share with other readers to see what they think. And then based on that feedback, I might still consider changes in shaping. And at some point when I feel really pleased, then maybe that's a poem that I submit to Etchings or another literary magazine. The Indianapolis Review is a great one. And I'll see where it goes from there. It's a recursive process, it's circular, right? So we kind of keep going through, and it takes time. If there's a poem that frustrates you and you're just like, oh, I cannot get to the point where I'm satisfied that this is communicating what I want to communicate, then it might just take a little bit of living. I find that the poems I get the most frustrated about in the end are poems that I'm not sure how to resolve. And in doing a little bit of living, stepping away from it, sometimes life teaches me things and I can look back and think, oh, right? That's how that poem's end, or that's really what this poem is about. So give yourself grace while you're doing this process. So here's the before after. I started with a 5-minute poem that I wrote in class, kind of leaping off a prompt that was given me. And I've ended with a poem called Winter Garden that has changed a little bit of those words, the way it's presenting. And it's also preserved some of that writing as well. Right now, I'm feeling pretty good. I myself, I'm appreciating some of the imagery that's coming up. I get that sense of cold to warmth, that sense of appreciation. I'm still not sure about Winter Garden. Um, I don't know. I'm still not sure. That kind of harkens back to older poems. But this is the idea of the winter garden is, centuries old. So there's that. But I don't I don't make that kind of move very often in my poems. So I'm on the fence. That is something that I would probably talk to readers about to see what their response is and what they like about it, and then come back and work with some of these again. Um, Yeah. So moving forward, we are going to continue generating some new poems. So you should keep writing, especially as things pop up. You never know, as you're working on a book manuscript project, those poems yet to come in the next few weeks might become critical because now you're going to start thinking about your body of work, thinking about those holes, bridge poems, and different things. Yeah, suddenly a narrative sometimes snaps into place, or an intention for a particular emotional roller coaster ride you want readers to go on. So, uh, let yourself keep write as things come up. Keep writing those down. Revise the poems. Go back to poems that were in, handwritten in your notebook and pull them out and give them a little bit of attention. Just because you wrote off a prompt doesn't mean you weren't tapping into something that you've been thinking about that's connected to the other poems that you intentionally set out to write. Share your poems, right? We have workshop, we have friends, we have, other the writing center, we have other opportunities. So be sharing those. Be a great little literary citizen, and as you share, you can also be a reader for other people, and start thinking about how these might fit together for your manuscript, and know that some you might really like, but just not right time, right place. And so set those aside and keep working on them. Maybe they're going to find homes in other places, literary magazines, and they might become the foundation for another book project in the future. I cannot wait to see how you put these techniques to use, both in your own craft and as you are helping people in workshop. And I am so excited about the book manuscript that you are starting and can't wait to see what you create. Thanks.